We'll hand over quickly to Neil Weightman, who is Sales Director of iForce Group.
Thank you. Hello everybody, and apologies if I start croaking. I've got a slight throat infection, so apologies if that comes through. I'm going to talk through a multi-channel case study. Before I do, though, I'd like to echo what Joel said about one size fits all. There isn't one. There are a lot of different complex questions and variables involved in deciding whether you even want to outsource this service, let alone who you're going to choose, where it's going to be located, and so on. So I think, Joel makes a good point. There is no panacea. Just briefly, those of you who are not that familiar with iForce, for the last 13 years, we've been providing specialist logistics services to a stellar bunch of clients, and they really stemmed from initially online fulfillment, moving into multi-channel, and then actually looking at the reverse flow, which is increasingly important, and that reverse flow not just dealing with the reverse flow of the product, but then the secondary remarketing of that product. How do you maximize the value of product when it comes back? So that's just the quick iForce introduction. Before I go through the case study, I think, in my view, there are some fundamental requirements of a logistics provider who provides multi-channel logistics. And that starts with the back door. So making sure that we record the weights and dimensions of that product by QB scanning it, making sure it's gone into directed put away into the right location and the best storage medium is critical. And also then when that product leaves, when that order leaves, what you'll use is those weights and dimensions to drive the carrier routing. So that work that's done at the front end really drives the behaviors and how that product gets through. I think if you're offering a multi-channel service, you need dynamic pick waving. You're not going to be able to pick all of the orders at the same time from the same stock pool. So being able to what we call slice and dice the pick wave and make sure that we meet our SLAs in the most efficient way is absolutely critical. If you go around one of Mark's warehouses or mine, you'll find that those pick mediums vary. The product characteristics in dealing with a complex online order are challenging, and how you pick those orders will vary. So actually how you go and deal with that can vary significantly. Transport we talked about, and I'm sure in the conversation section later on, some of you may want to touch on the role that parcel shops and collection points will play going forward. They already are. Collect from stores run at a pace, but actually now how we utilise those outlets for delivery and for the reverse flow are going to be critical. And then, of course, you deal with humans. So whilst we have all developed fantastic systems that control all of those functions, at peak, we're perhaps bringing 4 or 5 times the amount of staff in that we'd have at non-peak. And that has a whole set of challenges in how we absorb those people into our teams, but we absolutely maximise the quality during what's your, as a retailer, a peak trading period. So in terms of our case study, this is a client's position in 2011, a very iconic brand, and in their pleasure to some degree was experiencing double-digit growth. It was a true multi-channel retailer, so it was encompassing all of the major channels, and significantly, as often is the case, the e-commerce growth and stretch was the tipping point for this business. So it had reached 20% of its revenues. As Joel touched on earlier on, many retailers were above that, multi-channel retailers, but it had reached a tipping point and it had got some significant growth. Privately owned, it was operating on a variety of systems. So as often we've found, what may have started off as a retail replenishment system and then started to require dealing with the online growth, those systems really just weren't able to cope. And they had a 90,000 square foot operation, central DC, which they moved into 2009. So what were the issues? Well, already they were into outside off-site storage. The new warehouse had effectively become full, and they were losing a lot of money by having off-site storage, and then double movement and treble movement of goods. The stock was in discrete pots, so each channel was being dealt with as a separate pot of stock, not dealt with globally. And then, again, as I said, their systems had kind of evolved and weren't particularly fit for purpose. So some of the functionality that you'd expect to be built in just wasn't there. As with systems, people likewise had grown into those roles. Not really particularly good management, no targets or measures. And again, as often happens, there's poor management information and data on which to actually manage the business. Stock turn was poor. 25% of the stock was over 12 months old, and therefore if you build all of this in, the cost per item fulfilled, even though they were getting the job done, was just too high. So they had a number of people who came up with a plan. The first one is put out the burning fires, get stock visibility, management and control in place. Make sure you reduce down your inventory that isn't moving and get more that is, and build this this additional capacity to deal particularly with e-commerce, which was growing at about 30% year on year. So upgrading management capability, but all of the time the investor, which is a VC who'd come in fairly recently at this point, was wanting to conserve cash. So improvements, as always, are wanted, but in terms of cash layout, not a particularly good time to do it. So the choices: remain in-house, develop your own ERP system and a new WMS, or outsource. In this case, the decision was to outsource. They felt that the pain of deploying a new WMS with a relatively inexperienced management team really wasn't the route to go for them. So in this occasion, as I say, no one size fits all, but this one did. Their caveat, though, was that the solution had to show a cost-benefit delivery. And just for clarity, that was after all of the integration and setup, and then the operating costs over the first 3-year period. So they were quite keen to make that change, but there were conditions attached to it. So their key decision points, really, as to why they wanted to outsource, they felt that they wanted to use that system to enhance the functionality. There were certain conditions or commercial shapes they wanted in place, one of them being that they wanted to pay a set fee for that WMS and the systems that were provided. And they wanted to pick individual orders, whichever channel they were for, in eachers, so in individual units, whether that's replenishing into a store or delivering to someone's home. And then all around of that, that efficiency and logistics performance comes the data and the MI on which to manage that stock. Extend the site capacity, obviously, and those operating cost reductions delivered over a 3-year period. So the result was that we implanted the solution into their own DC back in May of 2012. There's a number of enhancements that we put in, so click and collect, and some carrier routing and managing the reverse flow much better. It's enabled the merchandisers to spend their money a lot more wisely. That warehouse capacity, which was thought to be full by the use of the systems and the management, has increased the capacity by 39%, and a significant cost reduction over the first year's cost per unit to serve.